Shogun, Episode 2, Servants of the Two Masters. Let's talk about it. By the way, thank you guys for checking out the Episode 1 video. It kind of blew up. I hadn't seen numbers like that in quite some time since I used to cover Game of Thrones back in the day in House of the Dragon. But anyway, I'm really excited about Shogun and continue to cover this, and really appreciate you guys watching. So let's jump right into Episode 2, Servants of Two Masters. No real wordplay here this week as far as the title goes. I thought these titles were really good so far. The first one, the Anjin, did have that double meaning. This time, Servants of Two Masters. I don't think there's necessarily wordplay here with the words if you speak it in Japanese, but the point here is that everybody's kind of got two masters here, so it's talking about a lot of different things. I think it applies to a lot of different characters. You have Toranaga, for example. He's serving his own interests as far as survival at this point, but also still at this point kind of serving the Taiko and his heir and all that coming of age at this point. And you know, Blackthorne, for example, he's serving his own country and his own interest, but at the same time now he's kind of serving Toranaga. So I think that can apply to quite a few characters who kind of play both sides of the fence. But anyway, we jump in here. 1 year earlier, we actually get to see the Taiko as he dies, and this in real history was Hideyoshi Toyotomi, and he was the actual Taiko in the beginning of the Edo period, or the period of peace after the Sengoku Jidai Warring States period. And at one point, you know, interesting enough, just a quick point for history is, you know, Toranaga, who's playing essentially Tokugawa, at one point he was actually against Toyotomi, the Taiko, and then kind of conceded to him, became his most trusted advisor. So pretty cool to get to see kind of the history here as we get some flashbacks. And we see that Toranaga turned down the chance to rule alone. He knew it was a death sentence, so I thought that was pretty cool. And it really shows how smart he is. And we'll talk about that more throughout this episode, obviously. And then we finally get to see the intro. The intro is really cool. I really like this intro. We had the cold open in episode 1, so we did not get to see the intro. But this seeing kind of the rock garden theme here with the outstanding music. And it's kind of like the Sea of Japan and all the waters in between all the various islands of Japan is the sand and the opening. We see the ship going through. And then the music is very reminiscent of Westworld, I thought, as far as how it sounded, what it reminded me of, just the score there. But really cool intro there as they introduce the characters and actors, all that good stuff as well. And then, of course, we see at the end there the kabuto, this Japanese samurai helmet, as the mountain around it crumbles, and that's all that remains. And it kind of shows you, there's going to be war at some point. I think that's basically what it's referring to. But really cool intro, I thought. So after the flashback 1 year earlier, we see Blackthorne finally meeting Toranaga. Obviously, they sat there at the end of the last episode in kind of awkward silence as they waited on the interpreter. And then we learned that Ramirez just told the Portuguese about Blackthorne, who he was and where he came from, and his plans as far as going to South America, then coming through, raiding the Philippines for that matter, and then heading to Japan to try to take over the Portuguese trade there, so they know what he's up to. We see Mariko there, and as she makes sure to translate correctly for the other translator. I believe they named him Suji, and this is very smart on Toranaga's part. He does not trust Suji or the Portuguese or any of that stuff. This shows you how cunning he is, so he brings Mariko in there and knows that she will be loyal to him and translate properly. Suji, even if he had planned to screw up the translation somehow, really had no choice but to translate correctly. So very smart on Toranaga's part. Then we see Ishido come in there, and again, he's kind of set up right now as the main antagonist. He will be his main rival. I believe he's the only one on the council who would want power for himself, and his main opponent right now is Toranaga because he has doubled his fief, so to speak, his size as far as his armies and wealth and all that good stuff during the time of the council. So, fun fact I forgot to mention last episode as well is that when we hear them speaking, they are actually speaking Portuguese. When we hear English, they're speaking Portuguese. So we heard them say, "Do you speak Portuguese?" Toranaga wanted Mariko to practice her Portuguese. We heard all that stuff. So I apologize, I forgot to mention that last week. So when we hear English, we're actually hearing Portuguese, and they just wanted to present it to us that way. But of course, the main cast speaking Japanese to remain authentic, which I think is great. Also, another fun fact, the 1980 version of Shogun, my martial arts teacher, Stephen K. Hayes, was actually in that and played several different roles, including some stunt work as well. So I thought that was pretty cool just to throw in there. Anyway, back to the translation scene. So Ishido walks in and basically sets himself up as the rival, and he's basically taunting Toranaga at this point. Like, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. You only have a few days to live, essentially. You know we're going to vote to kill you. Basically just kind of rubbing his face. But Toranaga plays along, plays the game, and sends Blackthorne to prison. And he basically says, I don't give a shit about him, although he does. He never had any plans to let him die. Then we get the start of a side story here with Mariko and her husband at, I guess, supper time with their child. She gets summoned to another meeting to talk about the previous meeting during the day, and this is at night, obviously. And her husband seems a little jealous. And I believe her husband's name is Buntaro, so I guess we're going to see more of him as we get this kind of side story developing. But they're already kind of setting that up. You can see he was kind of jealous. He was surprised that she was called to another meeting and not him. So we're getting some of her backstory here throughout this episode as well, more of her backstory. And then, only 2 episodes in, and these characters are already getting, great development. So we're learning a lot about her father dying 14 years earlier, all that good stuff as well. Then I thought it was a really cool scene here. We get to meet Toranaga's wife, Kitty, and it's really, really good scene where he's so stern all the time, and she's the only one that kind of gets to pick on him, gets to talk shit to him. No other person would dare do that, and she just outright talks shit to him. And he remains stern, but has that slight little smile, basically kind of just acknowledging his wife. You can see kind of the love there. I think he actually is a very caring person, the way they're portraying him. But, that slight smile is a really great scene. So Sanada is really, really doing well in this. He's just one of the greatest actors of all time, honestly. But especially in Japan. And then we find out that the two of the regents on the council are actually Christians. They're Catholics, and they had already been turned to Catholicism, and that is what Toranaga is going to use to save his own ass and essentially establish power at some point. He didn't plan on all this, obviously. I don't think it's something, at this point he wants to be shogun or anything, but I think he's kind of seeing that in order to survive, for his family to survive, he's going to have to do something. But right now, it's specifically about getting the hell out of Osaka alive with his people. They are going to, of course, want to kill the new Protestant guy here, Blackthorne, that showed up here, because they now know of his plans and who he really is. So, of course, he uses that to sow seeds of doubt and distrust in the actual council members, who seem to be on the same page for the most part. Now, I will say really quick about the council, I don't think that everybody there wants to be shogun. You have some older guys who don't want to deal with it. You have one guy with leprosy, and I don't think Toranaga does, as well as that we saw in the conversation with Dayuin. But I do think it's something that he may now consider, because he's going to have to do something at some point, because otherwise war's going to come regardless, so he might as well take the lead and take power. But I do think that Ishido would not mind being shogun as well. He's kind of playing this up like he's trying to protect the council and protect the heir, but I think he would kill him in a heartbeat, and I think they discussed that as well. So a lot of political intrigue already in the first 2 episodes. Really, really good so far. But again, it shows you how smart Toranaga is and how good he is at the political game as well, trying to send him to prison and kind of sow the seeds of doubt and distrust in the council itself, so they won't vote unilaterally to disbar him and essentially kill him. Then we get the prison scenes where we see Blackthorne talking to a priest there, and he learns the truth about Toranaga, because Blackthorne thinks he's so powerful, and he is essentially, but in this case, he's essentially a political prisoner in Osaka. And so he's kind of explaining the politics of the day to him, so he kind of understands that he can't hang his hat on being saved by him, because he was his guest and he was confused on why he was thrown in prison in the first place. So he gets enlightened about the whole situation. And then we see the council meeting, of course, where, the Christians do in fact want Blackthorne to be killed because he is a heretic. And really it boils down to their own wealth and power, money, because obviously we saw at the end of the episode that Kiyama is the most, wealthiest member of the regents as far as the Busho go, but he is already kind of in bed with the Portuguese and probably getting side money and all this kind of stuff, so they definitely want him out of the way. So Toranaga's plan works perfectly, and we'll see how that plays out in episode 3. But we do see Blackthorne again in prison learn about the Portuguese, and how I explained last week how they got rich in the first place, how they got in bed with Japan. The conflict between Japan at this time and China, there was no direct trade, so the Portuguese came in and said, we'll be the third party. So they're intermediary. So Blackthorne learns how they kind of established themselves in Japan in the first place. Silk, gold, and guns is basically what he was saying, is the Portuguese don't give a shit about their god. It's just silk, gold, and guns and money. So that's essentially what we're seeing in these kind of back alley meetings we saw, for example, with Kiyama later in the episode. But then we see he learns of this Portuguese base, and this is a really big deal, and it's going to be a big deal going forward here, and then at the end of this episode as well, because even Toranaga and the other Japanese leaders don't know about this base. Maybe Kiyama does. We'll see if that's the case, because he did see them at the end of the episode there with the Portuguese himself directly speaking to Del Aqua, I believe is his name, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But then we see Ishido visit Yagushige, and again, this is going to be interesting because he seems to be playing both sides, Yagushige does, but he's also very smart himself, although he seems to be kind of a sick bastard who boils people alive. He does actually seem to be loyal to Toranaga. He's almost a, what we would call in today's terms, a ninja, or in those days it would be called a shinobi no mono, or just shinobi. And he's the one who's gathering this information and actually takes it back to Toranaga, as we see later. So we see them talking, and he kind of plays up to him. He's on his side. Again, this goes back to the three faces or the three hearts concept we talked about in the first video. Is, he's putting on this public face in front of Ishido in order to please him or whatever and save his own life, but he seems to really be faithful, or at least loyal to some degree, at least, to Toranaga. And then we see, of course, him knowing what's going on after talking to Ishido, getting this information. He's the one that actually rescues Blackthorne, but takes him to Toranaga instead. So he's kind of this double agent, but he seems to be really loyal to him. So that kind of proves to us, the audience at least, and we'll see if there's any more twists and turns, that he is loyal to him. So he does save his life because he knows how important he is. And he also learned how important he was to Ishido in some way to keep the peace on the council. Ishido wanted him dead and agreed to it, so he saves his life. And I thought it was a good scene there when he says, call yourself a dog. So that was pretty funny as well. And then we finally see the meeting between Toranaga and Blackthorne as well, where they get a chance to actually speak with Mariko there translating as well. And I thought it was really cool. He says, draw me a map of the world as you know it. And he uses the rock garden there and draws out the world and shows him where England is, where Japan is, talks about there's a war there in Europe right now, and all this good stuff, and then how Spain and Portugal have agreed to essentially split up the Eastern world. I thought that was really cool to let him draw it out for him and let him know what the hell is really going on. And essentially they just think Japan's theirs for the taking, and they're just using these people, and they eventually want to spread Catholicism and take it over just to be a part of their empire. So really cool scene there. And then we get another mention of the Minawara blood. This is the last shogun, I believe, is what they're referring to here. So the Minawara clan is based off the real-life Minamoto clan, which ruled Japan during the 12th and 13th centuries, and they're the ones who instilled the first shogun. So by claiming direct lineage to the Minamoto clan, Tokugawa declared himself an honorable and worthy figure to become the new leader of Japan. And this is what the other lords fear that Toranaga is going to do. And then we get a good scene here with Toranaga near the end of this episode where he's talking to the priest Suji again, and where he wants this black ship to leave, as they call it. And he's about to stamp his approval, but then he kind of makes him realize, hey, I know about your secret little base with these Ronin samurai who are all Catholics now. And he does not stamp his seal of approval for that ship to leave. We had met the ship's captain earlier, but this black ship apparently is one of the most valuable trading vessels in Japan, and they want to get out of there with their supplies and money, and Toranaga actually shuts that shit down. And he mentions the base, so now he's kind of shown his hand there to the Portuguese that he knows about this base, and he's going to be doing some investigating. So we'll see how they try to recover from this one. And this is when we get to the final scene with Kiyama there, the member of the council, the wealthiest on the council. Now we know why. He's talking with the Portuguese. He's talking with specifically Del Aqua, and he's essentially working with him the whole time. So his interest is there since he is converted to Catholicism. So whether he's doing it for his God or whatever, or just money, we don't really know if he really believes all that or if he's just doing it for money and power. We'll see. But he's already kind of in bed with him anyway. So they're, again, kind of going back to the title, playing both sides, a servant of two masters. And again, really quickly, just to mention this for those, it's going to be tough to learn the names and everything for the first few episodes, maybe the first season. But the council does consist of Kiyama, which I just mentioned. He's the Christian who is now working with the Portuguese. Ono, I believe he is the one, if I'm not mistaken, with leprosy. so he would be behind the screen at most of the time. Sugiyama is also there. He is the eldest member of the council, but he is not Christian, so only Kiyamo and Ono are actually Catholics. Ishido, of course, who is going to be the main antagonist, and of course Toranaga himself. That's the actual council members, the Bushu. And then we get the great scene at the end of this episode where Blackthorne is sleeping because he gave him, Toranaga gave him a special place in the castle, and says, you're my guest, this type of thing, for providing him with all this information. And we see Kaio being an assassin here. It seems like she's going after Toranaga. They're all concerned when everybody's alerted, obviously. When they start seeing bodies laying around, they're after, they want to protect their lord, Toranaga. Turns out that he had swapped rooms and gave Blackthorne his own room, and he switched to the other room. So she was actually trying to kill Blackthorne. So now we have to figure out, that was the cliffhanger there. Who was she sent by? So they did catch her and kill her. Toranaga himself actually caught her. She did cut Blackthorne in the end there as he tried to help as well. And I also believe Toranaga says himself that it is not Ishido. So it's not Ishido trying to kill him. It's somebody trying to kill Blackthorne. And so the question is, who is that? Is that going to be Kiyama and the Portuguese? That's my guess, but again, that's just a guess. So we'll see what happens in the next episode. So really good ending there. So a great close to the episode with that hectic scene of her running around, and she's just killing everybody she comes across. So she wasn't even going to try to escape, I guess. I guess she knew she was doomed. Maybe she would have if she actually got to Blackthorne. But either way, he actually goes and tries to help out. So you see them protecting each other already, and they just got to know each other. So there was some level of trust, not trust necessarily, but certainly respect, and some level of trust after their conversation. So they're already kind of developing a relationship. So that's going to be really, really interesting going forward. But anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. As usual, thank you for all the support, especially you guys on Patreon. I really appreciate all your support. It keeps this channel going. I hope everybody is enjoying Shogun as I am, and we'll continue to cover it here on this channel, and maybe even do some live streams. We'll see what happens. But hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you for episode 3. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.